Hello everyone, this is Jen, and I make useful English Lit study videos on Shakespeare, poetry, fiction, literary devices, and more to help you get top grades in the subject. In today's video, we're reading Imtiaz Dharker's poem Tissue, which is another one of the Power and Conflict poems on the AQA English Lit syllabus. So as usual, we'll be looking at some brief contextual information about the author, and then we'll move on to covering language, form, and structure of the poem. So a couple of brief points about the poet herself, Imtiaz Dharker. Dharker was born in Lahore, Pakistan in 1954, but her family moved to Glasgow in Scotland when she was 1, so essentially she grew up there. She is the winner of the 2014 Queen's Gold Medal for Poetry and was even considered for the 2019 Poet Laureate position after Carol Ann Duffy resigned from the post. But Dharker eventually decided to withdraw to maintain her privacy. So she wanted to focus on poetry writing instead of the public duties associated with being Poet Laureate. But in any case, the popularity of her poetry in the UK at least is evident from just how widely studied her works are in the GCSE and A-level English Lit syllabus. But Dharker is also actively involved in a lot of outreach and promotional work when it comes to poetry, as she often tours around the country as one of the resident poets of Poetry Live, which is an annual festival where British poets perform their works in front of many students. So she reads to over 25,000 students every year, and she was also actually married to the founder of Poetry Live, the late Simon Powell. Dharker is actually also an artist and filmmaker in addition to being a poet. So besides her verse publications, she has also held 11 solo exhibitions of her drawings in Asia and Europe. She also regularly scripts and directs films for NGOs in India, with a specific focus on improving women and children's rights. So before we dive into the poem, let's look at the title for a quick minute. So for most people, the word tissue probably brings to mind paper tissue, which is of course the kind of thin, soft and pliable material that we use on a daily basis. But it also actually carries a biological meaning, because tissue refers to a group of cells that form organs and muscles. So living tissue, compared to paper tissue, is much more durable. And as we go on to read this poem, we'll see that this tension between manufactured tissue versus organic tissue, between the materials made by man and those materials inherent to man, will become a central motif. So the poem opens on a cryptic, ambiguous note, as it says, "Paper that lets the light shine through, this is what could alter things." So immediately we're led to this question, what are these things? And why would something as pedestrian as paper have the power to change things? Now, as if anticipating our initial questions, the speaker offers an answer in the echoing half rhyme of things and touching in lines 3 and 4, as you'll see here. Things, touching. This is then followed by more half rhymes in lines 5 to 10, including kind, find, back, hand, who, whom, wait, date, and also actually the I rhyme of height and weight. Now, what does this sonic syncopation suggest? Perhaps it suggests this harmonious interaction between the sort of paper which carries intellectual value, like the sort you'd find in these well-used books, and those who appreciate such paper. And we know that there are people who appreciate this sort of paper because we know that these pages are smoothed and stroked and turned transparent with attention. And so by understanding paper as a symbol of wisdom, which is indicated by the word age, and also experience, as indicated by the word touching, in the sense of encountering people and events in life, we see that humans have the power to mold and influence the course of events through wisdom and experience. And so at this point, we understand that it's not so much the paper per se that alters things, but those people who appreciate the value that paper can carry, that wisdom and that age-old experience that paper is capable of carrying through the medium of books, etc., that we could alter things. So we'll notice too that stanzas 1 to 3 are actually one long sentence spanning 12 lines, as you'll see here. The first full stop only comes at the end of line 12. So perhaps this reflects the nature of what's being discussed in these stanzas, which is the accumulated years of the age-old wisdom collected in lengthy compendiums of paper, which is of course the well-used books like the Muslim scripture Quran, which we can see here in this allusion to the Quran, and also the protracted detailed documentation of names and histories, who was born to whom, the height and weight, who died when, how, and which sepia date, etc. Right? So this is the sort of paper that holds precious durable value, and it's something that's constantly revisited with care by readers. So the enjambed syntax and polysyndeton in these specific lines, the polysyndeton here being indicated by the and in pages smoothed and stroked and turned in line 11. So these features nicely tail end this prolonged sentence and concludes the first idea as if we are turning a new page in the book of this poem to explore our next topic. Now, stanza 4 introduces a somewhat surprising juxtaposition as the speaker imagines big, sturdy constructs like buildings as paper. There's a lovely slant rhyme embedded in the whimsical imagery of soft, pliable buildings, as the diagonal placement of shift and drift present a visual mimicry of this building swaying in the direction of the wind. Right? So the big idea then is that even strong, imposing structures are products of small, seemingly insignificant elements, and that when we break down these grand constructs, we see that they are but an assemblage of tissues, as it were, which form the fundamental unit of all things. Now, from the grand to the minuscule, from nature to civilization, paper, or more specifically the tissues that constitute paper, is presented as the common denominator. And we see that as we enter stanza 5. So they are those maps that represent man's ingenuity when it comes to navigation and exploration. And there are also those receipts, those fine slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold and what was paid by credit card, which symbolize the daily humdrum of modern living to which man is, of course, tethered. And this idea of man being tethered to these trappings of pedestrian life is reinforced by the simile of these paper slips flying up lives like paper kites, right? Which is kind of tied to the strings of these receipts, to these daily concerns. So every single aspect of human existence then we see is supported by this nondescript, ostensibly flimsy material of paper. And this all-permeating nature of paper is once again subliminally conveyed through the long run-on sentence spanning lines 13 to 20. As we see here, the sun shines through all the way to like paper kites.
By the way guys, I'd massively appreciate it if you could hit the thumbs up button below, subscribe to my channel and switch on that bell notification if you find this video helpful so far. This would really help me carry on making these useful English Lit study videos so that you can get top grades in the subject and we can inspire more people to enjoy the study of literature.
Now with the turn into stanza 7, the imagery of the building resurfaces with this reference to an architect. But we soon realize that this isn't a conventional architect who builds with brick or block, but one who places layer over layer luminous script over numbers over line to ultimately trace a grand design with living tissue. Never meant to last. So this grand design with living tissue we can understand as a human body, which is verified in the poem's final line, delivered in this impactful one-liner stanza, turned into your skin. So finally, we realize that the paper that the speaker is referencing ceases to be the sort of thin, easily tearable kind of paper made from tree pulp, but through the speaker's imaginative leap, it transforms into this metaphorical paper of human skin, which is, of course, more durable and impermeable. So what can we make of the symbolic purchase of this shift? So in order to understand this, perhaps it's worth revisiting the many references to light in this poem, particularly in the interplay between light and paper. And we see that actually early on from lines 1 to 3. Paper that lets the light shine through, this is what could alter things. And then in 13 to 14, with the reference to the sun shining through the borderlines of the maps. And then finally, of course, the architect letting the daylight break through capitals and monoliths, through the shapes that pride can make, to find a way to trace a grand design with living tissue. So if we go back to our earlier analysis of the first stanza, we'll recall that the paper thinned by age or touching represents wisdom and experience. But what's interesting is that these qualities don't come without open-mindedness, without a willingness to embrace different perspectives and reflection. And these are symbolized by the motif of light shining through. Gossamer-like paper allows for light to shine through to illuminate greater truths about the world around us. Now, whether this be in imparting scriptural knowledge as represented by the Quran, or in uncovering new terrains around us, and this is represented by those borderlines and marks of rivers, roads, rail tracks, mountain falls, etc. that the sun shines upon. So in this sense, we see that paper, while being thin and fragile in its constitution, is an organic material that absorbs and utilizes its surroundings to generate new growth continually. Now, this stands in contrast to buildings, which block out light with their bricks and concrete. And as such, buildings are these static structures that never really grow into something greater and could even collapse over time, as suggested by the sharp tapering of stanza length towards the end of the poem, where the one-liner stanza 10 could be interpreted as a weak basis of support for what's otherwise a seemingly sturdy structure held up by its preceding 9 quatrains. So it's also possible then to read this building reference as an analogy for the way governments and bureaucratic institutions wield power, which can often be opaque, stale, and impervious to changes or new ideas. And the paper, in contradistinction, would symbolize those common people who are constantly striving to become better and constantly working to make up the social fabric and to contribute to growing their communities. Now finally, the paper, which ultimately shifts from pulp to living tissue, unveils what is perhaps the greatest human construct of all, and that's, of course, no building, no book, no map, no trappings of human civilization or trade, but instead the individual human body, which is a grand design with living tissue and one that's never meant to last, but is nonetheless the original source of all infrastructural grandeur and the vessel of intellectual wisdom. So towards the end of the poem, we realize that deep truths and grand creations aren't actually to be sourced from external inventions like books, maps, buildings, trade, governments, etc., but in what has first created these items, which is the human mind and the human body, capable of limitless ingenuity because of its paper-like capacity to let light, perspective, and experiences shine through. And that's it for this analysis, guys. I hope you found this helpful for your interpretation of the poem. And of course, if you appreciate my work, please do hit the thumbs up button below, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and make sure that you switch on that bell notification so that you don't miss any of my useful English Lit Study videos going forward. You can also, of course, check out my Power and Conflict playlist in the description below for those of you who are doing your GCSE English Literature. As always, you can follow me on Instagram at Hyperbolit and direct message me with any questions you may have. So I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!